Hello, and thank you for joining me. Today, we're returning to Fallout 76, where we're going to spend another 1,000 scrip with the Purveyor on 3-star ranged legendary weapons. And as always, I'll take a few moments to talk about each one, about what makes each one good, bad, or indifferent. So let's go on ahead and get started and see what the Purveyor has for us today. So for our first roll, we got a nocturnal short handmade with plus 50% limb damage and faster movement speed while aiming. So the nocturnal effect is an interesting effect. It used to be just straight up bad because it offered a debuff or caused a debuff during the day, so that during the day it was actually worse than a non-legendary version of the weapon. Now it doesn't do that. It just provides no bonus during the day, which seems like enough of a drawback to me. And it provides a fairly significant bonus at night. So if you're the type of player who would remember to switch your weapon based on in-game day and night, then you may find that weapon or that effect fairly useful. I am not the type of player who would remember to do that, so unfortunately it's not very good for me. The plus 50% limb damage, that I really don't like. It can have some use on fast firing weapons, especially ones that have low per shot damage, because it can help you, cripple the enemy more frequently before they actually get to you and buy you a little bit more time to kill them. But overall, I'd much rather have something on the second star that's really going to help me just bring my enemy down quicker. There's plenty of things there that do that. So overall, really not exciting. The third star, faster movement speed while aiming, that's really one of my least favorite third stars, just because if you have the speed demon mutation, and I do on all of my characters, then it's doing nothing at all for you. And if you don't have the speed demon mutation, then yeah, it's doing what it says, but at the same time, is that really doing much of anything for you? Because are you really spending a lot of time running around the battlefield while aiming? So, oh well, this one's not a great one. Let's go on ahead and move on to the next one. This one's kind of interesting. Here we've got a bloodied Tesla rifle with VATS critical hits doing plus 50% damage and 15% faster reload. So the bloodied effect is definitely the damage king when it comes to effects. There are some situations where anti-armor can outdamage it, and there are times when you might not want just the highest possible damage, but if you want the most possible damage per shot, in general, bloodied is going to give that to you. So that's an excellent first star, especially if you are a bloodied player. If you're not, then you can generally trade bloodied weapons for something pretty nice that you do find useful. So that's a good thing. The VATS critical hits doing plus 50% damage is an excellent second star, but unfortunately the Tesla rifle's not really where you want to see that, because even I, who use VATS almost exclusively on my riflemen's, my pistols characters, my shotgunners, pretty much all my characters except for my melee and my heavy gunners. I don't really use my Tesla rifles in VATS really ever. The whole point of using the Tesla is to just kind of fire at the ground or the wall and be able to hit everything around. So it's kind of a lost effect on this weapon, unfortunately, but the 15% faster reload is very good on a Tesla rifle, partly because they have a very small clip size to begin with. 15, as I recall, I normally run around with a quad, and I think it has 60, if I remember correctly. But also because the Tesla rifle is a little bit slow on the reload, not super slow, but definitely slow enough to feel it. So being able to reload faster is going to be great. And yeah, this one I might play around with, do a weapon spotlight video on it at some point, but unfortunately that second star keeps it from being really, really good. Anyway, let's go on ahead and move on to the next one. Also worth noting that I do think quad is better for a Tesla rifle. Your opinion may vary, but that is my opinion on the matter. But let's go on ahead and see what else we get. And here we've got a junkiesgatling laser with plus 50% limb damage and 25% less VATS action point cost. So the Junkies effect is definitely one of the strongest full health effects in the game, because it offers up to plus 50% weapon damage. Base damage, unfortunately, it's not it's additive, not multiplicative. The only one that, as far as I know, is still multiplicative is Executioners. But the Junkies effect is still one of the strongest for full health builds. The only real drawback being that you have to have 5 mutations. You get 10% damage bonus per addiction. You get 10% damage bonus per addiction. And so it does provide a little bit of a penalty for your character, but if you choose addictions that have penalties that don't really hurt your build very much, or if you're the type of player who uses chems a lot as part of your regular gameplay, then you can choose addictions for the chems that you use all the time, and you can get around those penalties in both of those ways. So it's still very strong. I believe Aristocrats is a little bit better in my opinion because it offers 50% with no drawbacks other than needing to keep some caps on you, but Junkies is still definitely a contender. The plus 50% limb damage is, we talked about that before, not very good, although this is kind of the weapon that it could be good on because it has a very high fire rate and the damage per shot is relatively low, so you could get a little bit of extra crippling ability out of it and find some use out of it that way. Still, I think you're better off with just equipping the perks that give you a chance to cripple a limb if that's what you want to be doing. So yeah, the 25% less VATS AP cost, that is a very good effect, but this is not the kind of weapon you want it on. You generally don't want it on heavy weapons, but this one especially because you're going to, with its fire rate, you're going to burn through your action point pool very, very quickly. So I just don't see where the reducing the AP cost by 25% is going to change that significantly. So overall, this one's not great. Also, it's worth noting that this is not great because it's a Gatling laser instead of an ultrasight Gatling laser, so the damage per shot is a little bit lower. So overall, this one's a dud. Let's go on ahead and see what else we get today. And here we've got a Nocturnal Pipe Bolt Action Pistol with VATS critical hits doing plus 50% damage and your VATS critical meter filling 15% faster. So we talked about the Nocturnal effect before, and it holds true here. If you're the type of player who will remember to change your weapons based on day or night, you may get some good use out of it. Especially if you're a full health build and don't want to be running around with a bloodied weapon or something like that. The VATS critical hits doing plus 50% damage is actually going to be reasonably good on a weapon like this because you really want to be getting those one-shot kills because this weapon is going to fire very slowly with a fire rate of 3. It's sort of like the bolt-action rifle or the hunting rifle where you have to cock it between or whatever, you know, before you can fire it again. So it's just going to be very slow, and you really want to be able to put your enemies down in one shot. That's the trade-off: high damage, low speed. And being able to get some extra damage from your VATS critical hits, that's going to help with that strategy quite a bit. The VATS critical meter filling 15% faster, well, that synergizes very well with that second star and means you're just going to be able to get more of those critical hits, all of which are going to be doing an extra 50% damage. So the second and the third star are very good for my playstyle and the playstyle of everyone that I know and play with on a regular basis. The Nocturnal effect is not good, and so it kind of kills this weapon for me and my friends, and really probably most players. But again, if you're the type of player who will change weapons based on day or night, then it can be good. So let's go on ahead and see what else we can get here. And here we've got a Berserker's Combat Shotgun with the last round in a magazine having 25% chance to deal double damage and 25% less VATS AP cost. So the Berserker's effect is kind of like the Nocturnal effect in that it's gotten better because it doesn't offer the same debuff to the weapon that it used to offer when you're wearing armor. It just basically performs like a non-legendary version of it. But when you're running around with no armor, you can get a pretty significant damage bonus, although I don't really think it's significant enough for the drawback of not having armor. It's much easier to survive in this game thanks to perks and various other things that help you stay alive when you're running around at low health but good armor than it is to run around at full health with no armor. So that's worth noting. The last round in the magazine having a 25% chance to deal double damage, if you've seen any of my videos before, you know that that's probably my least favorite second star altogether. It's like not having a second effect on the weapon. You may get a little bit more use out of it with a combat shotgun, for example, than you would with a lot of other weapons because of the small magazine size on the combat shotgun. But even so, I believe it has a base magazine of 6, so if that's correct, then you're basically going to see one double damage shot every 24 shots. And you won't be able to count on it, so it's just doing nothing for you. The 25% less VATS AP cost, that is a very good effect, and if you're going to be using a weapon like this, which the combat shotgun is very usable in VATS as your primary way of using it, then that effect's going to be very good. It's going to keep you being able to take more shots in VATS because your AP pool is draining slower, so you'll get more damage from crits and just from targeting weak points. So unfortunately, in my opinion, that's probably the best effect on this weapon, so I'm going to go ahead and classify this one a dud, and let's go ahead and move on to the next one. And here we've got an assassin's crossbow with bashing damage increased by 50% and +1 agility. So the assassin's effect is, depending on whether you're a PvP player or not, either one of the worst Slayer's effects in the game, because if you're mostly just PvE, then it doesn't take a whole lot to take down most of the human enemies in the game, even with a non-legendary weapon, so it's kind of not worth keeping around a weapon specifically to deal with humans. But if you are a PvP player, then it can be a very strong effect because you're probably not going to want to run around bloodied if you're doing a lot of PvP. So granted, I am no PvP expert, so, anybody who wants to correct me on anything I say about PvP, I will certainly be open to listening, but I do believe that the Assassin's Effect is one of the more desirable effects for PvP players. Unfortunately, the crossbow is probably not the weapon you want for PvP, and the second star bashing damage increased by 50% is definitely not the second star you're going to want. So the second star there, bashing damage increased by 50%, is really only good on miniguns if you are going to be running the shredder mod on it, because then it actually does quite a bit of damage for you. In every other case, it's basically adding 50% of almost nothing, so yeah. The +1 agility, it's not bad. I don't think anyone's really going to complain about getting an extra point of agility somewhere, but there are much better third stars, and the bonuses that you get from that +1 agility, the little bit of extra stealth, the little bit of extra action points, is just not that much. So overall, we got another dud here. Let's see what else we can get. And the trend continues. This time we've got a 2-shot short plasma pistol with bashing damage increased by 50% and your VATS critical meter filling 15% faster. So overall, I am not a fan of the 2-shot effect. It adds 25% damage to the weapon, but then it divides that damage up across 2 projectiles so that each one does 62.5% or whatever it is. Of the damage, of the base damage of the weapon, and, modified damage overall. So, unfortunately, that also means that both projectiles have to penetrate the target's armor independently. And that is a huge drawback, especially with a plasma pistol where its damage is already divided up between energy and physical, which is pretty high when you combine the two, but still... excuse me. But when you combine it, but it still has to already try to penetrate both physical and energy resistance to get the full damage, and now it's going to have to do it twice on a 2-shot version of this weapon. So overall, that's just bad. The bashing damage increased by 50%. Well, we talked about that on the previous weapon. This is not a minigun, so we're going to go ahead and move on. The VATS critical meter filling 15% faster is probably the best effect on this weapon. This weapon is the kind of weapon that you can definitely use in VATS almost exclusively if you want, so you could definitely get some mileage out of that, but overall, this one is yet another dud. So let's see what else we can get. And here we've got a bloodied hellstorm missile launcher with replenishing action points with each kill, and your VATS critical meter filling 15% faster. So we talked about the bloodied effect earlier, it being the highest damage effect in the game, at least in most cases. So that's a great effect. The replenishing action points with each kill and the VATS critical meter filling 15% faster, both the second and the third stars. They do synergize very well on this weapon, although depending on your playstyle will depend on whether you consider that good on this weapon or not. One thing to keep in mind about explosive launcher weapons like this is that if you use VATS to fire them, then if you miss your VATS target, then there is a chance that your projectile will just go off into nothingness and you won't get any explosion damage from that. Whereas if you just aim down the sights or hip fire it, then it'll still explode wherever it lands and potentially get some damage in for you. So it's worth being aware of that. It doesn't mean you can't or shouldn't use weapons like this in VATS. It's just something to be aware of. But if you do decide to use a weapon like this in VATS, then the second and the third stars could be very good. I think you're not going to get a whole lot out of the second star because if you've got a half-decent AP pool to begin with, then you're probably not going to be able to deplete your AP pool just by emptying the magazine of a Hellstorm missile launcher. But it's still not a bad thing. Now, and then the third star, I think you would get a lot more usage out of because it can, every crit is, at least in theory, supposed to be a guaranteed hit, so it avoids that issue of your projectile going off into nothingness. So overall, I'm going to classify this one as mediocre but interesting. Let's go on ahead and see what else we can get. And here we've got a Mutant Slayer's Gauss pistol with 25% faster fire rate and +1 perception. So the Mutant Slayer's effect is one of the better of the Slayer's effects just because there are times in the game where you're very likely to be going out and hunting down super mutants, such as when you're just wanting to grind some experience or in daily ops or whatever. So that's a good thing. And then it's also worth noting that the super mutants are not the squishiest creatures in the game by any means, so it's not, depending on your build and your primary weapon choice and various other factors, but at least in some situations, it would make sense to keep a weapon around specifically for dealing with super mutants. So that's not bad. The 25% faster fire rate, that's a bit lost on this weapon. It cannot be modified into a fully automatic version. It's semi-automatic only. The 25% faster fire rate does not help the charging speed at all, and the Gauss weapons are already able to fire as quickly as you can pull the trigger if you are willing to fire them without charging them. So it's really just not doing a whole lot for you there. The +1 perception, that's not a bad thing. I mean, the pistols are definitely the kind of weapon that you would likely want to use in VATS to get a little bit of extra damage and by targeting weak points and getting those VATS criticals. And the primary benefit of perception is it gives you some more VATS accuracy, so it's not a bad thing. It's not that much extra VATS accuracy, so again, it's unexciting. There are definitely far better third stars, but overall, this one's pretty mediocre, kind of on the low side of mediocre, so we got a couple more pulls here. Let's see what else we can get. And here we've got a Junkie snub-nosed 44 pistol with replenishing action points with each kill and faster movement speed while aiming. So I think we've actually talked about all of these effects, except not on the 44 pistol, but all of the revolvers except for the pipe revolver in this game suffer from, at least in my opinion, one major drawback, and that is that you cannot suppress them, so you're basically forced to go loud and proud and deal with things that way, which it's costing you a lot of potential damage to not be able to be in stealth. And yeah, I know that there are things you can do to start battles in stealth and get back into stealth and all of that, but you won't be nearly as reliable with your stealth as somebody using a suppressed weapon or a truly silent weapon will be. So that's a drawback, especially when you consider that pistols are a little bit weaker than most weapons in the game, so you really want every opportunity you can get to get some extra damage from them. So overall, I don't find this particular weapon exciting, and the Junkies effect on it, it's not particularly exciting for me, but it is a good version of this weapon, at least for the first star. The second star is actually going to be very good for a weapon like this because it'll help keep you going in VATS more frequently. So, because you are not going to be able to get some extra damage from stealth, you're probably going to have to put a few extra shots on most targets, which is going to deplete your AP pool if you are using VATS. So getting some of that AP back when you kill the enemy could be very useful, but the faster movement speed while aiming is pretty much a dud 3rd star. We talked about that earlier, so overall, this one, for the right player, I could see it being at least on the higher side of mediocre, but overall, I see it as pretty disappointing. Let's see what we get for our last poll today. And looks like we're not going to get anything that good today. We've got a nocturnal crossbow with plus 50% VATS hit chance and plus 1 perception. So we've talked about the nocturnal effect a couple times already. I'm not going to go back into that. Everything I said there applies here. The plus 50% VATS hit chance, that is one of my favorite 2nd stars in the game, at least for non-heavy weapons, because I'm a heavy VATS user, and it really does increase your damage because you land a lot more of your shots on the target's weak points, and it also increases the effective range of most weapons beyond the range on the weapon card because it offsets the accuracy penalty beyond that range, although it is worth noting that it does not offset the damage penalty beyond that range, so worth keeping that in mind. But still a very, very good effect on the 2nd star. The plus 1 perception doubles down with that 2nd star to give you even a little bit more VATS accuracy, but really not a whole lot else. So this one is overall still very disappointing. So unfortunately today we had a pretty disappointing run with the Purveyor. That's the way it goes sometimes. Maybe we'll do better next week. I hope so, but please remember, if you enjoyed my content, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps the channel out, and it doesn't cost you any money. And until next time, thank you for watching.